It's Friday, Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. Ha! Okay, it's Feedback Friday. I apologize if this seems rushed. Today is insane, and I've already recorded this once. It got screwed up because I still had it on Twitch settings, and so the recording just went bye-bye into the ether somewhere, so I'm going to try to do this as fast as I can because I have to do press for the War on Stupid tour, and I have to give the keys to because the house closing. It's been a real week. Bad segue, but help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/Leanna K. It helps out a lot. Somebody said they like the format, the flow of that at the end. I'm going to start doing it at the end too, but marketing says don't do it at the end because most people don't watch to the end. Most people don't watch the whole video, so just watch for 5 minutes, shitpost, comment, and move on. So I'm going to be doing both. Also, somebody asked me privately about the Lady Bits incentives. I'd recorded a much longer response because I figure if one person's asking, like the backer loot, if one person's asking, a bunch of people are wondering, those are going to go out in March. I had a lengthy, transparent explanation about that. But it got eaten and I don't have time to redo it again. So it will be out in March. I am on it. It's kind of a long story involving a postal backlog and a few other things, but they are going out because I want it all done, all wrapped up, everything sorted out, for Boss Fight to fund in May. So that will be done. I know these things are important. I know transparency is important. I wish I could go on more about this, but I can't. I don't have time. I apologize. I just lost the recording. The Punisher stuff, nobody cared. That was the lowest rated video I've done in ages. It really shows how much the stock of those Marvel Netflix shows has fallen. Again, that was a pre-record, and there probably would have been no content on Monday at all had I not done that. So at least I delivered, but lesson learned. Still trying to figure out this non-contentious. It seems like unless something is vaguely contentious, then nobody gives a shit, which is the reality of YouTube. But sometimes I just have to do fun. Though, even though some stuff was pretty contentious this week, people were pretty cool about the comments, and I want to thank you for that. I'm going to touch on the Blood Air thing, the Emily Zhao Emily Wan Zhao, sorry. Emily Wan Zhao. I reversed the two things, the two surnames. Family names. I forget what it is in Chinese. Anyway, that's relevant because a friend of mine messaged me privately about that whole thing. I mentioned to them that I was covering this, and they're like, good, because I'm sick of North Americans acting like they own the whole slavery thing. Like there was never slavery in China around the Russian-Chinese border. And, the fact that an Asian person was saying this was, it made me realize that I should have touched on that more. I was hesitant to touch on that because that is obviously not, that is not my wheelhouse in terms of history. I don't know as much about Chinese history as I should. I know the basics. I know much more about the symbolism in Asian storytelling, and the blue eyes mean something very different in Chinese storytelling, and I'm gonna mess it up, but it has something to do with the element of water and a free spirit and all that stuff. But the bronze skin in that part of the world was not indicating that she was a black person. That was indicating likely that she was a field worker. That usually is what it means, that they were out in the sun. It indicates like a low caste character, a laborer, for lack of a better term. Not everyone with dark skin is an Indigenous American or a black person. And this always really frustrates me because in their rush to outrage outrage, 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 outrage. North American activists tend to erase other cultural experiences, precisely the thing that they claim to be railing against. And that really annoys me because, you know, like, no, other cultures are just as valuable as our own. Screw this manifest destiny stuff and screw, it's not even Eurocentrism anymore. It's like, it's a very North American centric attitude that the slave trade that ended, you know, with the slaves being brought to America, I should say forcibly displaced from Africa, is the only kind of slavery that matters because it was the worst thing and all that stuff. The fact that there are lingering problems connected to that in North America is real, but that doesn't mean it's the only type of slavery that ever happens or that matters. And ignorance pisses me off. You guys know that, especially when it hurts people. I'm going to move on from there, but I really appreciate your empathy. I really appreciate that you guys express feelings in public. That's a good thing, especially since this channel is like overwhelmingly male viewership, and it's that whole thing about men expressing emotions in public, expressing the squishier emotions. We're just combating stereotypes left and right here. I want to get on to a really interesting back and forth in the comments. And people handled it pretty well because it was, you know, it started off as one person. I'm going to read it so I can see it. Oh, shoot. I moved the old one to upload the other video. And is it going to come back? Please come back. Okay, yes, it did come back. Okay, good. It's loaded. Okay. So one person commented, it's perfectly okay for, this is in response to the Adam Levine took his shirt off, internet freaked out thing. It's perfectly okay for women to lust over men, but whenever a guy does it, he's a pig. He's a pig. I have always loathed this double standard. Someone else said, you have it backwards. A woman who sleeps with multiple men is a whore. A man who sleeps with 100 women is a stud. This has been the double standard for like forever. And another person said, both double standards seem to be true at the moment. Strange as that is. Somebody else said, crazy idea. Maybe we should stop assuming because one side experiences something, the other side experiences the opposite. And it went on from there. But it was a really interesting exchange of perspectives. And I actually thought it was quite productive because the historical precedents for this weird, like, parallel double standards, structurally, there is a reason for it. It's very long. And if there's interest in me unpacking this more in its own video, I will do it. Let me know. But basically, it's that this is where we get into trouble with terminologies, because traditional academic feminism will say this is the lingering patriarchy that plagues our world. The problem with calling it patriarchy is that patriarchy is a decision-making paradigm. It doesn't necessarily define sex roles. A lot of different sex role binaries have existed in various patriarchies. It doesn't, and by patriarchy, I mean government, social and government systems where men tend to be the head of a household or considered the rightful head of a household, i.e. single moms, disadvantage their children, and so on. You know, but also governments made up of and controlled by men. And I think we can all, it's just fact that governments in North America are still overwhelmingly male, even with, you know, our liberal government running on gender parity in cabinet. That doesn't mean it's gender parity in parliament, you know. And also it isn't gender parity. It was an odd number, and there was still like, it was like 43 men and 42 women. Those numbers are wrong, but it's sort of that thing. It was still more male by one, but it's the thought that counts, right? And that was very controversial. That was considered this big publicity stunt, and people got all mad about it. But that those steps are taken because of the belief that we still have to smash patriarchy. Now, I really think that we could still have equal representation in government, and these sex role stereotypes would still persist. Because while they're rooted in sort of the same place, the idea that women were sexual gatekeepers, because if a woman failed to avoid pregnancy out of wedlock, then her children would suffer, because if, it was back then patriarchal ownership of property, patriarchal ownership of wealth, patriarchal inheritance, all that stuff, it all came through the father's line. And so without a father who would, take responsibility for the children, those kids were screwed because they had no money. And, it wasn't until first wave feminism that started to erode. And, equal pay was a major pillar of second wave feminism. So it is a relatively short period of human history that we're starting to approach anything egalitarian, I'll say. It's a much longer, more complicated history than that, but you get it. I don't have time for that. The thing is, these stereotypes die hard because they're rooted in this thing about trying to predict other people's perception of us as individuals. It's changed a lot. People sort of coming of age sexually in the 2000s and now. It's a very different world from when I was in high school in the early 1990s. The whole slut thing was still very much the paradigm. The thing is, I think we can agree, because we're all reasonable people here, we're not radicals, that these stereotypes are hurting everyone. They're hurting men, they're hurting women, and they're hurting people who don't fit neatly into the gender binary because they don't have sex role archetypes that they can follow. It's very confusing for them. They don't know how to be an adult person. And this all men are potential rapists thing, I don't subscribe to. It's not backed up by facts. The vast majority of men do not think that way, and the collective blame is wrong. This idea, though, that women are sluts and men are studs, that still is real, and that does still have serious ramifications in the workplace, because, who a man sleeps with, and unless it's like a sexual harassment thing, it's not relevant. But we still have this issue that if a woman is seen as sexually active, people don't take her as seriously at work. Like, once a woman is a whole person, once a woman is seen as, sexy, then she's not allowed to be anything else. And that's something I try to combat in my own work, just by showing leg and showing cleavage and then talking about smart things like this, and you guys are totally cool with it. So us, just by doing what we do, we're combating that, which is still, unfortunately, according to the various studies and surveys, still a very real thing in a lot of workplaces. It sucks. It's something we have to work at, because that's not fair, right? It's not fair for anybody. Because the problem is, because men are expected to be the sexual aggressors, because they're the one that are supposed to initiate it, and women are supposed to be the sexual gatekeepers, then men are the ones more likely to get accused of sexual impropriety just because of sex role, And there are a lot of very complicated reasons for this. We don't have to get into that now. The reality is, it's making things extremely uncomfortable for everyone. The question is, since we can, reasonable people can agree that both these women are slut, men are studs, and men are pigs, it's okay for women to go woohoo, Jason Momoa and Aquaman. The thing is, these two stereotypes are linked. And even though, the negative repercussions fall on one gender or another, depending on the scenario, they're linked. They're two sides of the same coin, the same, sexual double standard coin. We cannot minimize one without minimizing the other. I really believe that because of what they're rooted in. So I do call out the fact that, I don't get the whole woohoo Aquaman shirtless. I don't get it. I don't get the Jon Snow is hot. I don't get shirtless Thor. I don't get any of it. I find a lot, like the low slung pants in Thor, I find a lot of those scenes quite frankly gratuitous and uncomfortable because if I don't understand the purpose of it. Cool tattooing, cool tattoo design for Aquaman. And I guess, yeah, if you're swimming, you want, less clothes to weigh you down. But, gratuitous sexuality is gratuitous if it doesn't make sense, period. And that scene in Justice League where he was like wet and flinging his hair around and all the waves and he chucks the alcohol bottle into the sea, it didn't make any sense. It was just this weird sort of redneck perfume ad. And I thought it was dumb and I thought it was gratuitous. And so at least I'm consistent, But then this, let's face it, the slut shaming of women and the treating men as predators, it's still just demonizing the sex urge, right? It still is. It's like any sexy thoughts are just bad, period. And that's something that everybody has a role in working on. Because, unfortunately, this is just true. And a lot of people are not going to want to hear this, but because most primary caregivers are still women, the majority are anyway, a lot of the views in the world, a lot of the views of men and women and how they relate, moms have a lot of sway. Moms have a lot to do with that. And, when we see the benevolent sexism inventory, the ambivalent sexism inventory, that hostile sexism, mark a difference between men and women. That so-called benevolent sexism, the women are kind and men are strong, this putting women up on pedestals, this look, Mr. Bubbles, an angel, that kind of stuff, almost no difference between men and women. And that is the insidious stuff that we really need to take a good hard look at, because hostile sexism is relatively easy to spot, right? We all sort of understand that. It's this so-called benevolent sexism or sex role sexism that gets really nasty, because what they find is that people who engage in benevolent sexism, that becomes hostile really quickly because they're more likely to blame somebody or try to shame someone for stepping out of those quote unquote acceptable sex roles. And that's a real problem for a lot of people, because when we get into this idea of multiple masculinities, instead of just going, look, you're an individual, there's no one right way to be a man. I still maintain that traditional masculinity is more like, the 1950s kind of masculinity. Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. Yes, sir. No, sure. Gosh darn. Golly, I'm going to have a glass of milk instead of a whiskey. I think that's more of sort of a traditional masculinity, not Jason Momoa's Aquaman, which is hyper masculinity that came out of 1980s and 90s steroid-driven beefcake cinema. That's a much newer phenomenon than the chivalric masculinity that has a much better claim to being traditionalist. But that's a fight for another day. I think that we really need to just chuck all this stuff out. All this stuff means far too much. We are labeling people far too hard. We are prejudging people based on immutable characteristics, and that's not right no matter who does it. It's causing a lot of problems. Everybody's walking around scared. People don't know how to act. People are afraid to take risks, because if you step out of that, this is right for you to do, you get punished hard. I know it. I live it. For all the talk about, oh no, we're defenders of women in gaming, those loud, vocal, leftist column writers are the first people to punish a woman for stepping outside of that sort of chaste traditional femininity, good girl femininity. They're the first ones to complain about that. They're the first ones to chastise a character or to silence a real life woman when she chooses to express herself sexually in a way that men may find desirable. It's a real problem. And so that's why I like when we've sort of created a community where people can disagree respectfully. Some people might argue that some of the comments were not respectful. I think it was in bounds. There was debate. It did get kind of heated, but it didn't cross the line into you're a terrible person or you're a sexist person. People argued the idea, not the person. And that's really good. I really think that every time that happens, that is a victory. That you guys collectively, all of you watching this community, that's not small. And that's not something that should just be treated as, well, yeah, that's expected. No, that's a good thing. And it should be praised. That doesn't just happen. And I'm not doing that. Perhaps I'm setting an example, but I'm not doing that. You guys are doing that. And you guys deserve a lot of credit for creating a community where these things can be debated, sometimes even heatedly, without shit going off the rails and just becoming unproductive. So I think that's really cool. And hopefully everybody who participated in that back and forth took something away, learned something about a perspective different from their own. Because that's all I can ask, right? As long as you're sort of open-minded, as long as you're trying to see the other side, you don't have to agree. You just have to understand. It's a very different mindset. So I'm going to leave it there. Next week, I'm going to try to do another Twitch stream on Tuesday. I will update Monday whether that's happening, because I thought that worked. And hey, Twitch, if I can get my 8 hours in a month, then I qualify for affiliate. And okay, maybe that's something, because I need new revenue streams. But then Thursday, I'm going to try to get that last free speech video done. The last in that little series, so I can make the playlist and okay, good practice. Because then the War on Stupid tour starts. First date is February 16th in London. And then that goes through the beginning of March. I don't know when it's going to end. But then, Lady Bits incentives go out. Boss fight prep begins. Boss fight prep has already begun, but begins in earnest because I'm done with Lady Bits now. Lady Bits hat goes off. Boss fight hat goes on. So it's going to be a big year. It's going to be an exciting spring. And I'm looking forward to it. Thanks for being along for the ride. And I said I was going to do this. If you like this content, if you find this content is helpful to you, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK. YouTube funding sucks. All these videos on these topics keep getting demonetized. I lose a lot of money because of YouTube's algorithm crap. Patreon support is essential, or you can do the PayPal option one time using the email address in the description box. Thanks for watching.